Hey guys, this is Sam from the Privateers team, and I'm going to just take you through a handful of new features in the event editor and a few more advanced features to show off how they work. So let's just jump right in. So I'm just going to create myself a new event and add a start dialog and add a response. Here I am on the ship. And we can just call this one response can just be continue. And then, let's see, it's a tavern event. Let's just put in some garbage here for the tavern stuff. What am I missing? Oh, I need to name it. Advanced test. And I need something else. What else do I need? Days to expire. 14. Sale days 3. Okay, so we've got a good little start event here. I'll go ahead and save that. A couple new things in here. One is the faction, so you can select what faction this event is for, if it's sort of for a specific faction. This isn't used for anything yet, but we might use it in the future, so whatever enemy types you're going to have in here, you could pick what faction makes sense. Then another thing is the tavern character. So when you're in the tavern, you can pick what's the appropriate sort of artwork to show off your guy. There will be a lot more coming in, but right now there's only a couple. And then everything else I think is normal. So the first new feature I'm going to show you is giving rewards on return to port, because with tavern quests, a lot of times it makes sense not to give the reward until they return, because maybe the person who gave you the quest is the one who's going to give you the reward. So we can add an action result here, and now there's a new type, which is return to port award. It looks very similar to the normal awards that you can give, so we can give 2 items and 2 times the normal gold, and then we can put in some text here that explains what the reward is for. You have completed what I asked of you. Here is your just due reward. Okay, save that. So now what's going to happen is if we go to the game and run this test event, here's our... Oh, I don't think that was the right event text. Let me restart, because I think it needs to restart to reload the file. So if we run the test event, here we go, and when we sail back to port, hopefully we don't get interrupted, because that would be bad luck. Okay. No! Okay. Let me just restart it again. Oh, man. I should turn off, random things from happening when I do these recordings. Let's try again. Turn. And when we get back to port, what's going to happen is we're going to get this pop-up that's as you return, you have completed what I asked for. Here is your just due reward, and we got gold and 2 items. And then in the event results here, it's going to show our gold and our 2 items. Okay, so there you go. You can now give rewards on your way back to town, which is good for storytelling. Okay, there's a new sort of advanced feature which we call triggers. So let me show how this works. So mainly they're for tying different branches together to produce different outcomes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new dialogue, character dialogue. I'm going to call it advanced test dialogue. And it's just going to say, hey, what do you want? And then let's add 2 responses. I want X, or I want Y. And then here, we're going to add an action result. And this one we're going to call wait. It's a new one called wait for trigger. And then we'll say trigger X. And then here, on this response, hey guys, sorry about that, got interrupted. So let me go back here. So I've got 2 responses, I want X and I want Y. And then on this I want X, I'm going to add an action result, which adds a set trigger. We'll take this trigger name here, trigger X, and we'll set it to true. And then, so what's going to happen here is when you do this character dialog, and you choose this path, then it's going to set trigger X, which is going to allow this then to continue. So we can add a dialog result that says X has been triggered, and then add a response says great. Right, so we're having one dialog down here that will then trigger a certain action up here in the main event, or this action could be in a totally different branch, right? You can sort of use this any way to kind of trigger a particular path. Now, let's go and take a look. If we load up the game, let's see how this works. So, run the test event. Oh, you know what? I totally forgot something, which is that we have to give this to somebody. So, let's go into the scene. Let's add a character. It can be a golden mask. Sure, he needs to be neutral. And then let's give him this advanced test dialog. Okay, let's save that and let's try again. So now there's going to be a guy on the ship that we can talk to. And based on the dialogue that we pick, it will have some effect. Okay, there he is. So let's go talk to him. Okay, so if I choose I want Y, nothing happens, right? Because I didn't set that trigger X. But if I select I want X, X has been triggered, it resumed. Great, right? Okay, so that's how the basic trigger works. Now you can get a little bit more tricky with it, and let me show you. So in this I want Y, I can also add an action result here, and say set trigger Y. Okay. And then another good thing to do here is to add a dialog owner remove dialog at the end of these so that they can only run through the dialog once. That's most dialogues, that's the correct thing to do. So I'll go ahead and just do that. And then I'm going to go for this action, this wait for trigger. I'm going to make this into a list by using semicolons. And I'm going to say I can wait for trigger X or trigger Y. And then I'm going to add another dialog result here. It says Y has been triggered. I knew it. Okay. And then what you're going to see here is that in these results, we no longer have just a probability, we have a trigger. And if you put a trigger, then that enforces that this particular result path is only available if that trigger is set. So this allows us to do branching based on triggers that happened previously. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that this probably will only happen if trigger X is triggered, and this can only happen if trigger Y is triggered. And what that's going to mean is that if trigger X is set, it will always go this way, and if trigger Y is set, it will always go this way, right? So this way, you could do something where, you know, if you had a conversation with somebody, and then you return back to the previous branch, like you had a conversation in a cave, and then you leave that cave, based on how you did that conversation, something different could happen after you get back out of the cave, right? So an event that happens in sort of one branch can then significantly impact what happens in another branch. So that's how these work. Okay, so let's go just run through it once more and see that that works how we think. So test event, let's start it up. Okay, so now I'm going to go talk to this guy. And I'll pick I want Y. Y has been triggered, right? And if I run the test event again and I pick X, I will get the result that X has been triggered. X has been triggered, right? So this is a pretty powerful technique that's going to allow a lot of different sort of storytelling. So I'm pretty excited to see how people's going to use it. Okay, so that's how the new triggers. So next, we just have a bunch of little random things here to talk over. One of them is random dialogue. So if we go back to this dialogue, normally you're making them basic and allow random false when you're going to assign it to explicitly to a character. But what you can do now is you can make it faction and then assign it a faction, like a golden mask. And then allow random true. Now this is a random dialogue that could be given to any golden mask that's neutral. So the idea is we should have a collection of these, like a whole bunch of them, and then they'll randomly be assigned to golden masks in scenes when you're around neutral golden masks, and you can go interact with them, and they should give you some bits of lore about that faction or something, right? Some interesting conversation. So that's how you can write a random dialogue. So probably, we'll want to have some separate XML files that are just full of a bunch of these random dialogues that will then get assigned, and they can be faction specific. The way the character talks should be consistent with how we've decided golden masks should talk. So that's how you do random faction dialogues. Another new thing is adding objectives to a prop. Okay, sorry about that. Got interrupted again. So the next topic is adding objectives onto a different prop in the scene. So if I go over here, I can add a prop. I'll just add another small ship into the scene. And maybe based on this response here, which is on a dialogue. So yeah, add an objective. So I want to add an objective, probably a simple portal that branches to somewhere. This is not going to work, obviously, because there isn't really a branch called somewhere. But now there's this explicit prop down here. So if I give the name small ship, instead of showing up on my ship, that prop's going to show up on the small ship that I've added to the scene. This was needed for some events that we were doing recently. So if we run the test event, you'll see that the prop showed up on this other ship. It didn't show up on my ship. If I just left it blank, it would be right here, but it ended up over there, or the objective rather. Okay, so that works. And then you can also use, I think we talked a little bit of points of interest. You can use specific points of interest to place props. Most places have an end. That's this one right here. So if you put end here, then it will end up at the end of, like if you were placing it in a cave, for instance, it'd be towards the back of the cave is the one called end. That's really the main use of this. You can also use it if you're making custom props. You can put in custom points of interest and name them and make sure that objectives land exactly where you want them. But most people aren't going to be making their own props, so we'll just skip over that really quick. So another thing is about binding crew. Or not binding crew, but binding the NPCs. So another thing you can do is I can have, let me put in 10 of these guys. And let me say bound true. This is going to make them start out sort of in chains. And then another thing you can do here, there's a new action result called bind NPCs. And I can say all the neutral NPCs I want bind to become false. So this will unbind them at the end of this conversation, right? Let me turn this back to be basic, non-random. Okay, so now if I run this, we're going to see that all the guys are bound at the start of the event, and then after this conversation, they'll all become unbound. So here they are, they're all in chains. I talk to this guy, I say I want X, and as a result, now they're all unbound, right? So this is just a little technique you can use to, have slaves or something, or it's a little storytelling technique that can be useful. It used to be only you could bind and unbind the crew. Now you can bind and unbind other NPCs using that one. Last two things just to mention very briefly, because I haven't talked about them in any video. One is that there's this alternate text. So here it says, here I'm on the ship. If I put in an alternate text and say, yes, I made it to the ship, there'll be a random chance each time this event runs of picking one of these two. And you can add as many of these as you want. It will randomly pick between them. This is just a way to put more variety into the event. If you're writing like a small, simple event that doesn't have a lot of complexity in storytelling, it's just sort of like interrupt events are a good example of this, where maybe a lot of them are going to be similar. You can just change up the text every time using this alternate text. And another thing that you can do is when you're branching, anywhere where you're setting a branch, like this, where it says a branch event somewhere, you can do a semicolon list. So you can say somewhere 2, or somewhere 3, and then it will pick randomly between the ones in this list. So this is like, also, if you're just trying to get some more variety into a single event, like you could imagine an event where you're going into a cave, maybe you could have 5 different kind of caves, and the same event can trigger any of the 5, right, randomly. So the user there's less predictability for the user. They don't always know, when I go to this cave, it's always like this. No, there's like 5 different ones, and they don't know which one they're going to get, right? So both of these are just techniques to sort of add a bit more flavor into the replayability of each event by changing up the text or changing up how the branching happens randomly. Okay, so those were all the topics I wanted to cover for this video. Thanks for tuning in. Excited to see what you guys are going to make with it.